The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler, February 8th, St. Cuthman of Steyning. The spiritual riches of divine grace were the happy portion of this saint, who seemed from his cradle formed to perfect virtue. His name demonstrates him to have been an English-Saxon, not of British extraction, either from Wales or Cornwall, as Bollandus conjectured. He was born in the southern parts of England, and from the example of his pious parents, inherited the most perfect spirit of Christian piety. From his infancy, he never once transgressed their orders in the least article, and when sent by his father to keep his sheep, he never failed coming home exactly at the time appointed. This employment afforded him an opportunity of consecrating his affections to God by the exercises of holy prayer, which only necessary occasions seem to interrupt, and which he may be said to have always continued in spirit, according to that of the spouse in the Canticle, I sleep, but my heart watcheth. By the constant union of his soul with God and application to the functions and exercises of the angels, the affections of his soul were rendered daily more and more pure, and his sentiments and whole conduct more heavenly and angelical. What gave his prayer this wonderful force in correcting and transforming his affections was the perfect spirit of simplicity, disengagement from creatures, self-denial, meekness, humility, obedience, and piety in which it was founded. We find so little change in our souls by our devotions because we neglect the practice of self-denial and mortification, live wedded to the world and claves to our senses and to self-love, which is an insuperable obstacle to this principal effect of holy prayer. Cuthman, after the death of his father, employed his whole fortune and all that he gained by the labor of his hands in supporting his decrepit mother, and afterwards was not ashamed to beg for her subsistence. To furnish her necessaries by the sweat of his brow and by the charitable succors of others, he removed to several places. Nor is it to be expressed what hardships and austerities he voluntarily and cheerfully suffered, which he embraced as part of his penance, increasing their severity in order more perfectly to die to himself and to his senses, and sanctifying them by the most perfect dispositions in which he bore them. Finding at a place called Steyning a situation according to his desire, he built there a little cottage to be a shelter from the injuries of the air, in which, with his mother, he might devote himself to the divine service without distraction. His hut was no sooner finished, but he measured out the ground near it for the foundation of a church, which he dug with his own hands. The inhabitants, animated by his piety and zeal, contributed liberally to assist him in completing this work. The holy man worked himself all day, conversing at the same time in his heart with God, and employed a considerable part of the night in prayer. Here he said in his heart, "Whither shall I go from thy Spirit, O Lord? This is the place of my rest for ever and ever, in which I will every day render to thee my vows." His name was rendered famous by many miracles, of which God was pleased to make him the instrument, both living and after his death. He flourished about the 8th century, and his relics were honored at Steyning. This place St. Edward the Confessor bestowed on the great abbey of Facam in Normandy, which was enriched with a portion of his relics. This donation of Steyning, together with Rye, Barrominster, and other neighboring places, made to the abbey of Facam, was confirmed to the same by William the Conqueror, and the 2 first Henrys, whose charters are still kept among the archives of that house, and were shown me there. This parish, and that of Rye, were of the exemption of Facam, that is, were not subject to the jurisdiction of the diocesan, but to this abbey, as 24 parishes in Normandy are to this day. For in the enumeration of the parishes which belong to this exemption, in the bulls of several popes in which it is confirmed, Steyning and Rye are always mentioned with this additional clause, that those places are situated in England. St. Cuthman was titular patron of Steyning or Esteyning, and is honored to this day on the 8th of February in the great abbeys of Facam, Jumièges, and others in Normandy, and his name occurs in the old missal used by the English-Saxons before the Norman conquest, kept in the monastery of Jumièges, in which a proper mass is assigned for his feast on the 8th of February. In the account of the principal shrines of relics of saints, honored anciently in England, published by the most learned Dr. Hickes, mention is made of St. Cuthman's, as follows: At Steyning, on the river Bramber among the South Saxons, rests St. Cuthman.